All right. So if it is okay with everyone, let's go ahead and get started. Um, so welcome everyone to the 2026 Democratic Engagement Dialogue Series kickoff. We're thrilled to be launching this series with President David Schejbal's keynote. We're so honored. The title of the keynote is Why Democracy? Exploring the Philosophical Foundations of Democracy and its Role in Shaping a Just and Equitable Society. Um, so, I'm Daniel Pascu Aguilar. I'm founding director of the Center for Social Justice and Chief Diversity Officer at Excelsior University. Excelsior Leadership, the Center for Social Justice, and the Civic Engagement Rope Team welcome you to this afternoon's kickoff keynote of our 2026 Democratic Engagement Dialogue Series. Our first monthly Democratic Engagement conversation is scheduled for tomorrow, January 15 at 3 p.m. For more information, please go to communities.excelsior.edu. We hope you can join us tomorrow as well. For those of you who are not acquainted with Excelsior's rope teams, we have developed a collection of communities we call rope teams, which we describe as representation and support villages around our students and our community members based on what matters to them and to you. If you want to learn more about our rope teams or how to engage with them, you can visit them again at communities.excelsior.edu, or you can connect with me or the Center for Social Justice for more information. We have a very special guest with us today, Dr. David Schejbal, president of Excelsior University, a higher education visionary, and a nationally recognized leader in adult and non-traditional higher education. David, we're really honored to have you. Thank you for doing this. But before we introduce you formally, I have the pleasure of introducing Erin Kofel, a fantastic colleague and Chief Communications Officer at Excelsior, who has kindly offered to say a few words about democratic engagement and multi-perspective dialogue. Erin?
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you for including me today. What an important topic this is for discussion. The series you're doing is phenomenal, and thrilled to be part of your kickoff. Welcome, everyone, to the 2026 Democratic Engagement Dialogue Series kickoff. We are thrilled to be launching the series with President Schejbal, and his topic today is Why Democracy? He'll be exploring the philosophical foundations of democracy and its role in shaping a just and equitable society. In today's complex world, democratic engagement is more crucial than ever. We believe that strongly. Paul Lachelier's Uncommon Thoughts on Democracy reminds us that politics impact our daily lives and collective engagement is key. Lachelier's principles that politics are ubiquitous, that democratic engagement is about caring beyond ourselves, and that democracy can be a way of life. They guide the democratic engagements of Excelsior University's Center for Social Justice. Democratic engagement is not just a civic duty, but a lifestyle choice that can enrich our communities and our lives. Research data shows that 70% of Americans believe democracy is very important for the country. However, a 2023 report by the National Civic League found that only 20% of Americans feel very confident in their ability to live democratically or influence local government decisions. And according to the National Civic League, only 30% of Americans feel very confident in the future of democracy. This is where higher education institutions like Excelsior can play a vital role. By fostering democratic engagement and multi-perspective dialogue, we can empower individuals to become active citizens and leaders. A 2020 study by the Knight Foundation found that students who engage in discussions with peers holding different views report increased empathy, understanding, and engagement. At Excelsior University, we're committed to cultivating a culture of democratic engagement. Our Democratic Engagement Dialogue series is designed to spark conversations, build community, and inspire collective action. As Lachelier notes, democracy can be a way of life that we choose, one that involves participating in community dialogue, data collection, and responsible information consumption. President Schejbal is a nationally recognized leader in adult and non-traditional higher education, and he will share insights on democracy's role in shaping a just society. Thank you for joining us for this thought-provoking conversation and to explore ways to integrate democratic engagement into your life and community. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you. Let me check something really quickly. It looked like it wasn't recording, but it is. Okay. Thank you so much, Erin. Really appreciate that. And before I introduce President Schejbal, I want to thank a number of people and units who made today's event possible, starting with Maria and Courtney from marketing, Erin, Stacy, Jason, and Connor from communications, Jamie and Mackenzie from alumni relations, Bonnie Ordonez from faculty development, of course, our president, David, and Lori and Jill from the president's office. Thank you so much for your amazing partnership and support. This wouldn't be happening without your support, by all means. Also, toward the end of our session, we will have time for questions, sharing, and dialogue. That's a very important part of engaging democratically, engaging in dialogue. So as you think of questions and comments, please include them throughout the session in our Q&A space. After the keynote, we will either read them to President Schejbal for him to address them, or you could also request to be elevated to ask your question visibly and verbally, so we can add you to the panel to do that. We're looking forward to your insight and to our dialogue, so thank you. And now, I have the honor of introducing Dr. David Schejbal. Dr. Schejbal, or David, became president of Excelsior University in August of 2020. He is the fourth president since Excelsior's founding in 1971. David is a leading voice in adult and non-traditional higher education, and with his leadership, Excelsior remains student and mission focused. Throughout his career, David's primary focus has been on making education accessible, affordable, and flexible for all students, the Constellation being such an evidence of that. He previously served as Vice President and Chief of Digital Learning at Marquette University. And prior to joining Marquette, he was Dean of Continuing Education, Outreach, and E-Learning at the University of Wisconsin Extension, working across all 26 campuses of the system to extend the resources of the university to communities throughout the state. David has received many awards, including the Julius M. Nolte Award for Extraordinary Leadership, which is the highest award given by the University Professional and Continuing Education Association, or better known as UPSEA. His affiliations with industry organizations include serving as a member of the governing board of the President's Forum, chair of the Board of Visitors of the Army War College, and the past president of UPSEA. David is a frequent keynote speaker, and his insights about reinventing higher education have appeared in such publications as Forbes, Evolution, Innovative Higher Education, and Insight Higher Ed. David earned a PhD and an MA in philosophy from the University of Connecticut and an undergraduate degree from the Iowa State University. And I would be remiss not to mention his impressive cooking, baking, woodcrafting skills, and general knowledge, which he shares with all of us with incredible generosity on a regular basis. David, thank you for being here with us today. We're truly honored, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for that very kind introduction, and you know, I appreciate the cooking. That's probably my best quality here. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to a conversation with all of you guys. I'll talk for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time for conversation. So feel free to engage, and feel free to raise questions or comments anywhere along the way. So when Daniel asked me to do this talk, I started thinking about where to start. And as Daniel said, all of my degrees are in philosophy, and it's hard for me to get out of philosophy. I remember in graduate school, people would ask me, what do philosophers do? Do they like just sit around and think? And yeah, we do that sometimes, but we also do some other stuff. Um, but one thing that I am fond of doing is asking a lot of questions. I tend to uniformly reject dogma, no matter what it is, whether it's political dogma, religious dogma, even scientific dogma. If people are saying we shouldn't question it, there's a problem. And so I think it's really important to approach any issue with curiosity, but also wanting to understand why we choose what we choose. And government is something that we choose. And we have choices. Democracy is only one of them. Monarchy is another one. Communism, socialism, fascism, those are all types of government that the people can choose. And so why do we pick democracy and why do we think it's so wonderful? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to talk about it from a historical perspective and how democratic thought evolved and where it came from and what impact it had on the United States. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. And then hopefully, like I said, plenty of time for Q&A. So let me share my screen. Can you all see that?
We can see that well, David.
All right, great. All right, so why democracy? So let's start about 1500 years ago. So throughout the Middle Ages and into the 16th and 17th centuries, the democracy was not part of the lexicon. The general belief was that some people were chosen by God to lead, and the nobility in particular were the recipients of God's gift. And of course, then they were able to pass that gift through the bloodline to their offspring. And so you had this perpetuation of leaders throughout history who weren't elected, they weren't picked by the people, they were in their roles because of the general belief that they were chosen by God to be in those roles. Around the 15th, 16th centuries, people started questioning the divine right of kings and came up with a few very fundamental observations. One of those observations was that people are naturally equal. And what does naturally equal mean? Well, when you take little babies at birth, they all look pretty much similar and they cry similarly and they have similar needs and they poop the same way. And so they sort of look the same, right? So they don't look like any of them are chosen by God. They all look pretty much the same. And so people started saying, well, maybe people really aren't all that different. And maybe some people really don't have a natural right to anything in terms of being special, singled out by God. Maybe everybody has the same rights. And so in philosophy, this is known as the beginning of the liberal tradition. And so today we toss around the word liberal. Some people think it's a horrible term. Some people take it as a badge of honor. What I'm going to talk about is the liberal tradition from a philosophical sense. And in the liberal tradition, the focus really is on seeing individuals as fundamentally equal. And on this focus on individual natural rights. And those rights might come from nature, they might come from God, but the key here is that everybody's got them because people are all equal. So nobody has special rights. Everybody has these rights, right? This is sort of the foundation of modern democratic thought. And the other areas that the liberal tradition focuses on are liberty, individual freedom, the ability to make choices and to consent to things. So you're not forced into anything. You actually make choices. And the idea that individuals need to tolerate the differences among others. So you may not like other people, you may not agree with other people, but you recognize that fundamentally we are all equal, we all have the same rights, and we all have the same freedom to exercise those rights. That's really the bottom line. Okay. So we'll start with Thomas Hobbes back from between 1588 and 1679. So Hobbes was a British philosopher whose most famous book is called The Leviathan. And Hobbes is one of the first philosophers who really clearly starts to articulate the liberal tradition. And he says, look, let's imagine people outside of any political constraints. So imagine there's no government at all, no police, no fire department, no formal social structures. That is called the state of nature. And Hobbes uses the state of nature to really say people are living in the woods, they're very individual, and if somebody harms somebody else, there's no recourse other than going back and harming that person on your own if you're able to do that, right? And so in the state of nature, Hobbes says that life would be poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Because in the state of nature, there are limited resources. Everybody's fighting everybody else for those resources. And you get what you can get. And if you can't get it, then you're out of luck. And there's no recourse. And so for Hobbes, the state of nature is the worst possible environment to live in. And so it's in everybody's best interest to come to agree that they'll give up some of their individual liberty in order to get some security. So I will forego my right or my ability to hurt Daniel or Aaron in exchange for them doing the same for me. So we're going to agree not to hurt each other. But the agreement isn't worth anything if there's no enforcement of the agreement. And so we need some way to enforce the agreement. And for Hobbes, the more the more powerful the enforcement, the better. Because if you have a lot of enforcement, then people aren't going to hurt each other. Okay. So there's two important points here. One, that Hobbes recognizes that everybody is fundamentally equal and fundamentally free. But fundamentally equal and fundamentally free is not good, because then people can hurt each other and they do nasty things to each other. So given that we're all fundamentally and free and fundamentally equal, what we're going to agree on is safety and security. And the way we're going to get that safety and security is we're going to appoint somebody to enforce safety and security. And so this isn't the beginning of democracy per se, in the sense that the safety and security could be the job of a king. but we're all agreeing together that we want that safety and security. So in that regard, you have that foundation of democratic decision making justifying a form of government. The form of government doesn't have to be democratic, but the process, the justification for it is democratic. Um, so Hobbes comes out with this. And of course, not human knowledge is cumulative and it's evolutionary. And philosophers read each other's writings, and they don't have to read each other's writings. This right. Somebody published something five days ago, and so you read that stuff, especially not back in the 15 and 1600s. You're reading people who wrote something 100, 200 years before, and so on throughout history. So the next guy I want to talk about is John Locke. So John Locke is also a British philosopher. He lives after Hobbes, and but he's very familiar with Hobbes. He reads Hobbes, and he is a brilliant thinker. And he says, I, I sort of agree with Hobbes's fundamental tenets. People are naturally free. They have natural rights. Um, but the state of nature isn't as miserable as Hobbes makes it out to be. There's no reason to think that people are naturally going to just kill each other and hurt each other. Um, and as a matter of fact, that freedom that we have, that Hobbes is more than happy to get rid of for safety, that freedom is actually really important, and we shouldn't give it away too lightly. And so Locke is thinking about these natural rights, and he says, we we do have natural rights, and for Locke, they're God-given natural rights, and we have these natural rights. Everybody's got them by virtue of being a human being. Everybody's got them, and the rights are to life, liberty, and property. Now, if that sounds familiar, wait a minute, and I'll get to it. So these natural rights have to be protected. These are really the things that we want to protect. And so the danger in the state of nature, this pre-government, pre-social state, the danger in the state of nature isn't that we're all going to kill each other the way Hobbes thinks. The danger is that we're going to either intentionally or unintentionally violate each other's natural rights. And when that happens, we need some way to protect those rights. But we don't really want to give away liberty because that's one of our natural rights. So how do you get society? How do you get that protection without giving up liberty? So this is the foundation of democracy, okay? The way you get that protection without giving up liberty is that you exercise the liberty to jointly create a form of government that you always control. So the people say, look, we'll form a government, we'll agree to some rules, but let's understand that agreeing to those rules means that we can take them back. If we don't like the way the government's doing stuff, the only legitimacy the government has is what we give it. The minute the government stops doing what we think the government should be doing, we can take it back. And if the government doesn't want to give it back, we're going to revolt. Because life, liberty, and property are inalienable rights. They are God-given. Everybody's got them. Nobody's giving them up. All right. So then we get to 1776. And we know some stuff happened in 1776. Some guys were writing stuff. These guys aren't writing it out of the blue, right? People think, oh, the Declaration of Independence, brilliant work. How did these guys come up with it? Well, gee, they were all reading John Locke. And so the beginning of the Declaration of Independence, now that you've heard what I said about Locke, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, And then among these rights are life, liberty, and not property, because we can't guarantee everybody property. So we'll give them happiness because, happiness, it's kind of squishy. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Only men really have these rights, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, right? This is again what I was just saying. The government gets its power from the consent of the people. The government has no claim to legitimacy without the consent of the people. And that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish it, straight out of Locke, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to then that them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Going back a little bit to Hobbes, right? So we want safety and happiness, but what we're really doing is we're protecting those three inalienable natural rights: life, liberty, property, while not really happiness. Okay? So that's how we get to the Declaration. And these agreements that we make with one another, we call the social contract. And the social contract is essentially just a social agreement among equals. So a social contract is either an implicit or an explicit agreement where individuals give up some freedoms for societal benefits like security, order, welfare, creating the legitimacy for government, and defining mutual rights and duties. So the social contract is this agreement. Do we have an example of a written social contract? Well, by golly, we do. It's the Constitution. It is a social contract. This is what governs the country. And this is what we all rely on. And so when we have conversations about, well, is it constitutional? Is it not constitutional? We are referring to the foundational social contract that was drafted as a practical document to govern the country. The debate that we all hear is about the relevance of a document that was drafted in 1787 and whether every word that was drafted in 1787 is still relevant today or whether it should evolve and change in some way, right? Like, for example, maybe women ought to be able to vote. Maybe women are actually people. Maybe Black people are people. So these are changes that have happened over time to expand the notion of equality and natural rights that have evolved in the thinking of society. All right. So this is how we get to the Constitution. And jump forward to fairly contemporary times. A Harvard philosopher by the name of John Rawls wrote a seminal work called A Theory of Justice, working again in this tradition of the social contract, the liberal tradition that I've been talking about. And Rawls does a really interesting, very clever thing. He says, because people are pushing back on the social contract and on the way that it's evolved, and they're saying, well, maybe this isn't the right way to go about it, et cetera, et cetera. And Rawls says, look, let's do a thought experiment together. Let's imagine that together, I don't know how many of us are on this call, about 30 people, right? So let's imagine that together, we are going to choose what kind of society we want to live in. And so we can choose whatever we want. So I will choose, me, David, I will choose a society where the people who get to lead and who have the most money are older white men, 6 feet 2 inches tall. Okay, everybody agree? You guys good with that? So everybody says, no, that's not fair. So then Aaron says, well, let's go with younger women who have brown hair. And Daniel says, well, I don't like that. So Rawls says, okay, so let's use a very different thought experiment. We're all still going to be able to decide together what kind of society we want to have, but none of us know what we're going to look like in that society. You're not going to know what gender you are. You won't know what race you are. You won't know any physical characteristics that you have, and you won't know your lineage. So the question is, if you don't know any of that stuff, what's the rational choice to make in choosing a particular form of social structure? So I encourage all of you to do this thought experiment on your own. I'll tell you where you'll come out. Where you come out is you actually want a social structure that's as equal as possible. Because if you choose a social structure that benefits older white men that are 6'2", and you come out looking like Aaron, you're not going to be in good shape. And on the other hand, if you choose, any particular characteristic, pick your characteristic as the best characteristic in that society, and you don't get it, then you are at a significant disadvantage. So it's in your own best interest, in every one of our best interests, to choose a social structure that fundamentally supports equality. Now, the other piece of this is, according to Rawls, that from a practical perspective, some people will naturally be disadvantaged, right? They'll have natural disadvantages. Some people are stronger, some people are smarter, some people are faster, slower, et cetera, et cetera. And so what you want is a weighing of benefits in that society from a distribution of wealth perspective that benefits the least well off. And you want it as a security blanket because you might be the least well off in that society. So you don't want to get screwed. So you want to make sure that you have a distribution of goods and services that benefit the least well off in case you happen to be in that least well off category. And otherwise, you want as much equality as possible so that no one is at disadvantage since you don't know where you're going to fall in the spectrum. Okay, so Rawls is basically saying this isn't some crazy making. This is the rational choice to make from a self-interested perspective, and it's fair or just because you don't get to advantage yourself from the get-go simply by prejudicing your own benefits. So that's how we get to justifying, for example, a democratic form of government with a significantly graduated income tax, right? That would be a way to have a distributive justice process that benefits the least well off because the people who happen to be the best well off need to put money back into the society to compensate the people who are less advantaged than they are. So that's my 20-minute summary of how we get to democracy and why we choose democracy and why it's a good choice to make. So there you go. That's my spiel, and I'm sticking to
it. David, this is I always learn so much from you. I love how you contextualize things and help one see uh, the surroundings, right, of of the core of what we're discussing. So thank you so much for taking that time to walk us through that history and that philosophy behind what we talk all the time about and think about democracy. Um, I don't think I had ever craved democracy more than now. It's something that's in my mind in a regular basis. And um, if it's okay, I'll ask the first question to give people time to think of comments and questions. So everyone, please, as you are bouncing off ideas in your heads, please use the Q&A space to share those with us so that we can bring them up and have a conversation about it. But the reason for which I have devoted 25 years to higher education, and I would imagine that many identify this, is I truly believe that education can be a key ingredient to the preparation of our next generation of leaders. And to a large extent, I fear that the changes through which we need to go to truly transform and respond to the needs that we have in front of us might be too big for us to be able to implement. That, right, I might not even be able to see that capacity, let alone apply it. But to me, given what you've talked about and what we've been discussing about, and what Paul Achelier talks about in terms of the relevance, right, of democracy and the opportunity to have that safety and to have that freedom and to have that happiness, that liberty, it is critical that as higher education institutions, we see that as one of the most important conversations we need to have in our curriculum and in our dialogue with our students and our communities. So I have always loved the innovation that you bring to education, and I'm really curious about your perspective on what are your recommendations on the ways in which we could most impactingly and effectively integrate these concepts into the education we facilitate, whether it is computer science or nursing or business or engineering, right? How do we help our new leaders to see that not only together we might have a better shot, right, than individually, but also that um, it is up to each one of us, right, to make that choice and to apply it in whatever we do.
Well, so um, so from a higher ed perspective, and I think from an individual perspective, I think my flippant answer, Daniel, is don't accept BS. And what I really mean by that is uh, don't. This is I'm going back to what I said in my opening slide. Don't accept dogma and don't accept what other people say as the gospel truth just because they say it. Question it. If people say all kinds of crazy stuff, um, people say that they're brilliant. People say, "Well, you need to believe me because I'm super smart and I'm, blah blah blah, whatever." No, that's not a reason to believe somebody. The reason to believe somebody is if there's evidence that actually supports the view. And so I think the reason that higher education has been so incredibly important over the centuries is that it helps people form critical thinking skills so that they can recognize BS and question it when they see it. And the more we can see it, and the more curious we can be, and critical we can be in our in how we view the world around us, the better off we're going to be. Because the thing that people should remember is that um, if we believe that people are equal fundamentally, and if we believe that people do have these natural rights, whatever rights you think people have, you don't give them up. This was Locke's point. He said those are, and it's in the Declaration of Independence. They're inalienable. That means you can't give them up if you want to. And so those are yours forever. And we don't want people to try to take them away through BS. And the way to see through it is through good, smart, critical thinking and questioning what we hear and see.
Thank you, David. Erin?
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, David. That was a powerful presentation. I appreciate your knowledge and passion on the subject. I think it hopefully will inspire those of us on the call today to think about the ways in which we engage with democracy. We have a question that came in through the Q&A. Let's see, how do we ensure each part of the process, legislative, judicial, and executive, can use their power to control checks and balances and not allow one portion to dominate another? Do you have thoughts on that, our structure as society and how we can engage to help support that?
So another truth about history is that no party in power ever surrenders power voluntarily. And again, going back to Locke and then the Declaration of Independence, this is why both Locke and the drafters of the Declaration insist that people have the right to take back their liberty in their government, even if it means overthrowing it. And it's a really hard thing to do. And I'm certainly not suggesting that we do that, but I do think we have a process to make our voices heard. And that process is both formal through various elections, and that those can be federal elections, but they can be your local elections, school board, anything, whatever. But there's also the process of civil disobedience, and there's the process of civil discord and demonstration and making your voice heard, because your liberty and your rights are no more or no less important than anybody else's. And so making your voice heard is really, really important, especially if you disagree with what you're seeing around you.
We have a few more questions coming in. Thank you, David, for that response. And I'm going to pose this to you first, David, but I think we can open it up to others in the chat here and have a good discussion on this too. How do you balance staying informed on modern politics without being dejected on the issues of today?
Without being dejected? So it's a really, really good question. A good beer helps. That always helps. So look, realistically, I think it helps to realize that you are not powerless, that you do have a voice, you have an ability to influence, you have an ability to make your views known, again, formally and informally. And then it's a matter of how much energy are you willing to put into it to support your views and your beliefs. And of course, there are many, many vehicles for doing that, many more today than there were, 20 years ago, right? The social media is rampant, for good or bad. But there are many vehicles for anything from hanging a sign in front of your house to getting on social media, to contributing to political campaigns, to writing pieces, et cetera, talking to your friends, talking to people. You do have a voice and you have an ability to communicate your views. It's a matter of doing it.
Thank you. That feels empowering to me. I hope to others as well. Daniel, opening that same question to you, would you like to share how you balance, the need for information with the need for sanity?
Yeah, I also thought that was a very not only good but very important question. It's interesting that one of the themes, because we've had 12 conversations and three keynotes as part of the 2025 series. One of the themes that generated uh, across is what is the line, right? When we talk about tolerance, when we talk about um, giving certain freedoms, right, for the collective um, well-being, um, where do I stop? And in those conversations, different people had very different perspectives of what that meant and where that line lied. And it had a lot to do with the level of with the journey that people have had, the level of privilege or limitation or privilege they have had, and how they had experienced that throughout their lives. And it seems to me that it is very important to do self exploration and be self-aware of where one is and what is one's capacity to explore differences and to be okay with sitting and hearing about someone else. I mean, clearly, some of the things that we're looking on the news and videos and um, do bring that very clearly to the front in terms of, wow, I like when do I withdraw versus when do I engage? Um, so to me, I think it depends on the person, but it's a process of understanding where one is, and if possible, understanding where the other is, uh, and engaging. I really liked David's emphasis on participate, right, in democracy, make your voice heard. And a lot of the democratic opportunities are all around us. Like how often do I get a survey and I think I don't have time to complete it? Well, that was my opportunity to participate in democracy and I'm letting it go, right? Or no one is going to pay attention to, well, that's the format that's being made available, or a forum or a town hall or engaging in a conversation with the neighbor, right? It just happens in many different ways. But I think that the combination of assessing where one is and what's one's context at the same time than taking advantage of what's already available, I think is very important.
Thank you. David, you talked about educating ourselves, being able to assess information and using our voices. When you think about using your voice, are there any pieces of information you'd give folks about ways specifically to engage and get started?
Um, well, I mean, one place to get started is in forums like this. Daniel's put these rope teams together, and the rope teams, regardless of the focus of the rope team, really are opportunities for dialogue, and they're opportunities for disagreement. And what a strong functional democracy really demands is spirited disagreement. Because one of the outcomes of a good democracy ought to be, even though we may disagree with each other, we understand each other, right? And this goes back to finding that commonality among us. If we all recognize that we're fundamentally equal and we have the same fundamental rights, then we see each other as human beings and we start to treat each other with a little bit of care. And so we don't vilify each other. We don't treat each other or certain categories of individuals as subhuman. We treat each other as equals who simply disagree on some issues. But we also should realize that disagreement on a few issues still provides agreement on 95% of everything else. And I guarantee you, if you find the person that you think is the absolute polar opposite of you, you're still going to agree on 95% of stuff, right? You're going to agree that, this particular food is good, this particular food isn't. The sun's going to come up tomorrow. It's nicer to be inside on a crappy day like it is right here in Albany than outside, et cetera, right? So really basic stuff. You're going to agree that you love your family. You're going to agree that you really enjoy your friends, et cetera. So all kinds of really basic stuff that makes us all collectively human and really, really the same. And so then there are some disagreements about usually pretty esoteric issues. So let's have some spirited conversations around those. We don't have to agree on them. We don't have to agree on them. We need to be respectful with each other and we need to help understand each other. Doesn't mean we have to come to agreement.
I think that's phenomenal advice. I mean, thank you for reminding us of those basic commonalities between all people, whether they are working in the workspace next to us or checking out at the grocery store or, carrying a bumper sticker that we disagree with as we drive down the road. So um, I find that basic information to be like a real stabilizer to approach these. So thank you. We are starting to wind down the conversation here. If there are any additional questions to pop in, we could probably squeeze one more in. But while we give some space for that, any final thoughts, David?
Look, I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you, Daniel. Thank you for asking and for creating the forum for this. I think these are really important conversations, and again, the more we can remind ourselves of our commonality and that the disagreements between us are relatively trivial if we focus on the important stuff, which is the commonality among us, and then figuring out how to live together in a way that is supportive and that helps us all coexist. That's really the important thing here.
David,
Thank you.
thank you. This is so powerful and helpful. And Erin, thank you so much for co-facilitating with me. It's always an honor. Just one thought that I wanted to leave probably as an action item to folks. Excelsior University and a number of folks had the opportunity to have an experience at Gettysburg. It was a leadership, call it a retreat, where we learned about the history and intermittently we explored leadership lessons and conversations that I think of them every day since, right? Was incredibly powerful. But one of the things that I took away that I had been thinking actually for some time is if we want to begin to engage in this question everything, it doesn't only start from me questioning everything that I hear or that I read or that I see. It also starts with allowing my context to question me, right? Is this reciprocal relationship that is built? And it's way more difficult to allow people to question you than it is for you to question someone else, right? And there are even theories and models like falsification theory, right, that has a series of steps that you go through to find the holes on things. But if we want to start engaging in this practice, one great exercise is for one to begin to open spaces for people to punch holes on what we think. So if you're a leader, at the end of any decision or conversation you have, open some space to say, let's punch holes in this. What are we missing? What population are we not serving? Whose voice is not part of this? If you're engaging in a conversation one-on-one, say, I want to see how you think differently, right? I really want you to tell me what am I missing? And because I think getting into that exercise of finding what is the diversity of thought around what we're talking about and the actions we're deciding to take. I think it's a very important principle of democracy, and it is, I think, very related to what you have been talking about, David. It's a lot easier to say it than to do it, but that's a recommendation that I have. As David and Erin have mentioned, this is a series that we're implementing at Excelsior University, the Center for Social Justice, the Civic Engagement Rope Team, with a lot of excitement and energy because we believe it is core to the focus of higher education, what we're meant to do, and to the future, right? Our next generation of leaders. So join us. We have a monthly conversation in collaboration with the Underground Railroad Education Center, with the YWCA of the Greater Capital Region, and with the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Center of St. Petersburg, every third Thursday of the month at 3 p.m. And you want to learn more information and register and everything, you can go to communities.excelsior.edu. But engage. Join us in the conversation. David, thank you for sharing your expertise and your knowledge, your amazing ability to help us learn. And Erin, thank you so much for your ongoing partnership. It means a lot.
Thank you both. It was fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody out there. See ya.